I would really encourage that they stay malleable and curious, that they have as many conversations as possible. You know, call it pivots, call it whatever you want, like really refining not only that like product market fit, but how you sell your vision to somebody, and how you're able to kind of quickly communicate the upside of what you're building, is kind of a pretty constant evolution, especially in those first few months and years. And so I think staying open to that and kind of letting every little piece of advice or every conversation or every time you have to do the elevator speech, make it a learning curve towards the right end messaging, is
Hmm.
really helpful and important.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups and 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours? Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Whitney Isola. And Whitney started her journey in being interested in healthcare and volunteering at hospitals during high school. Studied nutrition at college and graduated and worked in a community hospital for a period of time and worked in an ICU. Worked as a at a physician's practice with nutrition and diet or being a dietitian. After a period of time there, it lost a bit of the fun and turned into a bit more of churning out the billable hours. So started looking for some opportunities on LinkedIn. Went to work for a healthcare system for a couple employers, and then started doing some consulting projects before building out a supportive care platform as a side hustle with a couple co-founders. In the process, got an MBA, got hit with COVID and had to work way through that with that impact on the business. And then 2022 came along, moved over to a platform and built that, as well as co-founder of another company. Was growing with her, and she joined that about a year ago. So been a great journey. And with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Whitney.
Thank you so much for having me. What an intro. You tell it better than I
Absolutely.
do.
Absolutely. So I just gave a quick overview to a much longer journey. So why don't we rewind and unpack that just a bit, and tell us a little bit about how your journey got started, kind of going through high school, volunteering, and working in hospitals.
Sure, yeah. So I was always interested in something in healthcare, but I didn't really know what. So I spent a lot of time volunteering at a local hospital and got put everywhere throughout that time. One particular year, I did a lot of time in something called the Healthy Living Center, where the speech language pathologists, the physical therapists, the registered dietitians, et cetera, would kind of provide some of that auxiliary and allied health care. And I just kind of fell in love with the idea of nutrition. I worked with somebody who was just so bubbly and happy every day of their life. And it just seemed like such a pleasant environment in the big scheme of things in healthcare. So I decided to study nutrition, went through school with that as my major, and about three-quarters of the way through, took this massive business course that I just absolutely loved, but it was too late in my junior year to kind of like change things over. So I stuck with healthcare and figured that that would kind of eventually come back and play a role. And yeah, and so started my career in more traditional healthcare settings, working in a community hospital, as you mentioned, and then a multidisciplinary medical practice. Um, and, just kind of took things from there.
So you started working kind of, you say, in more of a traditional role, multidisciplinary kind of healthcare practice. Now, if I remember, from our prior conversations, you worked there for a period of time and kind of evolved from, something that was more enjoyable to something that was probably more focused on the billable hour, maximizing that kind of return for the employer, which is also, probably a bit stereotypical as well. But kind of walk us through kind of how you arrived at that point, and then kind of what you or how you decided to shift gears a bit when you reached that.
Yeah, so in my very first job, I was in the hospital setting and I would round with a team of physicians in the ICU each day, for all of the touch points of patient care. And I got to kind of like know them on a more personal level doing that and having that familiarity day in, day out. And so they actually owned a practice that was right next to the hospital. So I pitched to them the idea of adding nutrition services. And they were into it. And so, we kind of looked at the numbers and the credentialing and et cetera, and what went into it. And so I started with them and I got all of the admin side of things set up. Everything from like training the front office staff to writing all of the materials, whether they're education materials or marketing materials. Um, I got everything, in terms of like billing guidance, like getting set up on all of these insurances and who would accept what diagnosis codes and what was appropriate for referral, trained the physicians on that, et cetera. And then, so that was probably, let's say 6 to 8 months of work in terms of implementing all of that end of things. And then I kind of noticed that as my day shifted to just straight billable hours, patient care, RVUs, um, there was a lot less joy in it for me. It was pretty draining to kind of go from patient to patient to patient without getting to kind of like work in kind of bigger, more robust projects like I was used to with the setup side of things. So, it's one of those serendipitous scenarios where I literally went to school thinking that I wanted to, do outpatient work for the majority of my career. I don't know how long, but at least a good chunk of it. And here I was probably less than a year in, feeling quite dissatisfied and thinking, oh no, 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 this is not for me for the next 5 or 10 year chunk of my life. So, yeah, so I just kind of used that time to have a lot of conversations, have a lot of informational interviews, ask people what they did, how they got to where they are. I started looking around for consulting opportunities or just like even random projects or um, just to kind of understand what was interesting to me and what challenged me and how I could refine some of my skills that were outside of the wheelhouse of clinical nutrition.
Mm.
And that, kind of led me to this network of people and founders and investors and et cetera that started to unfold. And so that was just really interesting to kind of happen upon the startup world that way.
No, makes sense, and it sounds like a good evolution. So now so you kind of say, you looked to make that shift, kind of looked or explored those opportunities, kind of got into the world a bit more of the startups. Now, kind of, as you got into that, and you touched on it briefly, but kind of what was that direction, or kind of, making that shift or that transition, kind of how did you get going, or where did you to focus on within the startup realm?
Yeah, so I mean, I continued my real work life, so to speak, for many more years to come. Everything always takes way longer than you think it will, right?
Mm.
Um, so I kind of feel like at that point I started to have these two parallel working lives, like my 9 to 5, so to speak, of continuing to work in health systems and clinical leadership and operations leadership, and then also having these projects and or businesses that I was working on outside of that, that were riskier, that some made money, some didn't, and that was kind of where the real education came in, and the real learning in terms of how do you build, set a vision for something, communicate that vision, bring investors on board that want to support, you getting from point A to point B. How do you kind of take those broader tentacles and roadmap more specific ways to operationalize that vision along the way? How do you identify vendors? How do you begin to understand your customer? And just all of the many ways that a business begins to unfold. So that was really interesting.
So now you said that it's kind of a, I'll say side hustle, or
Yeah,
usually a side hustle really feels more like a second full-time job, but you did
yeah,
that while you were, maintaining that, kind of the foot in the full, the traditional
yeah.
path or the working world, so to speak. So now kind of over what period of time did you make that transition, and kind of how did you decide, at what point did you decide, okay, I'm gonna maybe dive into this a bit more full time, or kind of put that full or more concerted effort behind it?
Yeah. So I probably did that parallel um, work lives for about 6 or 7 years, I would say. Um, so I was working in a healthcare system in New York City, and COVID, kind of came in 2020, that created a not only a ton of uncertainty with regards to what was going to happen, and what the markets were going to be looking like on the other side, in digital health and beyond. But also, I mean, I was insanely busy leading a team of 75 people through that crisis. And so I feel like 2020 was a little bit of like a pause in terms of, un, you know, feeling ready to take a big risk. But then, that obviously quickly shifted, and there was a massive investment into young companies, and a lot of dry powder sitting out there that was getting invested in a lot of young companies. And so I actually, ironically, I got pregnant, and I used my maternity leave to really focus what I could with the business. And by the end of that mat leave, I was like, you know what? Wait a minute. I can probably make this leap. So I went back to work for a number of months thereafter, but within about 6 months or so of returning to work, I felt comfortable going ahead and making the leap full time into the digital health world.
Makes sense. Now, so you make that, that kind of that leap, go do that full time. You said that was what, 2021, 2022?
But yeah, that was 22,
They do,
right?
2022, you
Yeah.
make that kind of leap full time, guide people, during that period, have guided people through, kind of the issues that have arisen with COVID, and kind of going down that route. Now, as you made that, that kind of jump over, and doing that full time, and building and growing things, kind of walks you, how did that leap go? How did the evolution go? Did money rain down from the sky and didn't know, had money they knew to do it, teetering on the verge of bankruptcy and never knowing where the next paycheck's coming from, or somewhere in between, or kind of walk us through as you made that leap to going full time, how that went.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I had enough sort of conservatism in me to make sure that the company could afford me leaving my job full time. So, somewhere in between when you're a founder and when you're leading a young business, you're always kind of either in total fundraising mode or like in total planning for the next 18 months and what that looks like mode. But that said, like I wasn't I didn't not know where my next paycheck was going to come from. It's just more that I knew that things could blow up in the next quarter or two. So
Tonight. So, that kind of evolves, continues to play out now. I think at the same time, you also had, co-founder that was at another company and they were growing and they joined, or she joined the company, and that kind of helped to push things forward. So maybe kind of how did you kind of connect with that co-founder, and kind of how did that evolve the business?
yeah, so my co-founder for the other digital health oncology venture, he had another business that you know that was doing really well. And so I went ahead and kind of ended up moving over because my background is a little bit more like operations and logistics. And so he wanted me some support in terms of managing that growth and making sure we were kind of evaluating infrastructure and resources and right person, right seat, and things like that. And there was just a lot of trust there from the many years of communicating because of the other business. And so it was kind of a no-brainer. And yeah, so the business continues to do well. We're an ed tech company that builds a platform for nurses and physicians for healthcare education, both for support for their boards. We have a lot of products in the nursing area, from pre-nursing to nursing school to NCLEX boards and NP. So, and just really continuing to look at ways to grow, further into the professional market, the continuing education market, and also expand offerings to other disciplines. So I mean, it's honestly been one of the most fulfilling things that I've ever experienced. And if you had told me, you know, when I was starting out that I would be working in like education meets technology, I never would have believed a word out of your mouth. Um, and, it's just so fulfilling day in, day out, to kind of work with this team. So I'm having a lot of fun.
Well, that's awesome. Sounds like kind of arrived at a great spot and a great place. So maybe to want to follow up to that before we jump to the two questions I always like to ask towards the end. But before
Yeah.
we jump to that, kind of if you're to look and say, okay, kind of arrived to where we're at today and looking out in the next 6 to 12 months and kind of where things might be headed, kind of where do you see that potentially headed for you, or kind of what do you see as the next 6 or 12 months looking like?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think that we're looking very strategically at what the next steps are in terms of growing the team and continuing to expand our product offerings. We've been pretty cautious and slow in terms of taking on, new full-time team members and things like that. Just, obviously because there's such a commitment to one's livelihood and family and et cetera that kind of comes with that. But I think that we've had a pretty critical mass of a team for about a year now, and we've released 3 new products this year and are starting to plan for a few more. Our first few actually that will be in more of the like continuing education, advanced certification space. That will release early next year. So I think it's just a matter of really right timing some of the decision in terms of hiring practices, expanding team, continuing to get the product into market, and then looking at, where are we going to invest our resources over the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months to get more products into market and to continue to kind of leverage our brand name and student recognition and student trust into other areas.
Well, sounds like an awesome place to be and a great place to pursue in the future. So definitely wish you the best of luck on that. So.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate
And
it.
so with that, now as we've kind of reached the present day of the journey and even looking at a bit to where things are headed, great time to transition to the two questions I always like to ask towards the end of each episode. So with that, first question I'd like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What'd you learn from it?
I would say that the worst business decision that I ever made was having a bad business partner earlier on in a venture. And I think I was so excited about the idea and the vision that I was willing to kind of overlook some red flags because I thought we were bringing different skill sets to the company. But I didn't realize, I think I was too naive to realize how important the person that you're working with is and what that relationship and trust looks like.
Hmm.
Um, so, I mean, I think it's critically important to really not only wholeheartedly evaluate who you're working with, you know, very thoroughly and like making sure that the value system is really on the same page. Because if the value system is not, like that, a lot of these skills and et cetera, they're very teachable. Like people can attain more knowledge, but if the value system is not aligned, or if there's something off about the communication style, trust your gut.
Yeah, and I think that that one's a mixture of a lot of different things, and it's not even necessarily that one partner or one person you're working with or one associate is necessarily good or bad, but it's also aligning. Hey, you've got to get personality types, you've got to get direction, you've got to get what people are willing to invest, what direction they want to go, and kind of getting all those lined up. At the front end, you're always just saying, hey, we're aligned, we know each other, and it'll be a great relationship. And yet, as you get into that, you always have to look out and say, hey, sometimes it's one where you have to, while everybody is, has the best of intentions, getting those lined up sometimes is more effort or fraught with a bit more mistakes as you learn what to look for and kind of what will match up best. So definitely makes sense.
Yeah,
Second,
yeah,
second
definitely.
question now that I like to ask is, so now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one rule of thumb that you'd give them?
It's a good question. I mean, I guess I would really encourage that they stay malleable and curious, that they have as many conversations as possible. Call it pivots, call it whatever you want, like really refining not only that like product market fit, but how you sell your vision to somebody, and how you're able to kind of quickly communicate the upside of what you're building, is kind of a pretty constant evolution, especially in those first few months and years. And so I think staying open to that and kind of letting every little piece of advice or every conversation or every time you have to do the elevator speech, make it a learning curve towards the right end messaging is
Mm.
really helpful and important. I think it's something that, people don't like to feel like they're like selling their idea or becoming a salesperson, but you kind of have to become your own salesperson for the vision. And so, yeah, I think that a lot of work on that goes a long way in terms of refining the product and bringing it to market.
No, I think that's definitely makes good sense and it's a great rule of thumb for people to live by. So, well, now as we are wrapping towards the end of the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be the next best friend, any or all the above. What's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Sure. So the our company is Archer Review. You can go to archerreview.com if you want to learn anything further about us in terms of that educate health education test preparation services. And my name's Whitney Isola. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there and definitely try to keep a nice finger to the pulse of what people are up to in their professional lives and find that interaction really rewarding. So please don't be shy. It's Whitney, like Whitney Houston, Whitney, and last name Isola, but it's spelled Isola, Isola. So yeah, just come find me and we can talk shop. Or I'm always happy to kind of mentor young entrepreneurs or help try to make connections for people because it's so hard in the beginning, and I really I feel like I've definitely levered up on a lot of relationships over the course of my trajectory. So I'm always happy to do that for others.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, make a new connection. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again, Whitney, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now,
Yeah, it's
for
been
all of you
great.
other listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveunicorn.com, apply to be on the show. Couple more things as listeners. Make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And if along that your journey you need help with patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we are always here to help. Well, thank you again, Whitney, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you so much, Devin. This was a lot of fun.